Okay, now we are ready to put together a progressive cardiorespiratory fitness program. Before we begin, you will want to download the Heart Rate Reserve worksheet. When determining our exercise prescription, we must apply FIT to cardiorespiratory fitness. What is FIT? You got it. Frequency, intensity, time, and type. Let's take a look at how to measure intensity for cardiorespiratory endurance. As we learned, VO2 max is the best indicator of exercise intensity for cardiorespiratory fitness. However, it is impractical for everyday use. We are going to review several ways to measure exercise intensity that correlate to VO2 max. Before we begin, take a minute to find either your carotid or radial pulse. You can find your carotid pulse by sliding your two-piece fingers behind your ear and draw them down and slightly forward to just beneath your jawbone to your neck. For your radial pulse, again, use your two-piece fingers and begin at the base of your thumb with your palm facing up. Slide your fingers just to the inside of your wrist. Press gently to find your pulse. We are going to take your resting pulse for a full minute, so find your pulse at either location and get ready. I will time a full minute while you count your heartbeats. Begin counting at 1 when I say go. 3, 2, 1, go. Stop. Record your resting heart rate. Now that you know your resting pulse, you can calculate your heart rate reserve. Before we begin, print the heart rate reserve worksheet from D2L. Heart rate reserve is somewhat more accurate than just using your maximal heart rate because it takes into account your resting heart rate. An individual who has a more fit cardiorespiratory system will for the most part have a lower resting heart rate. You may want to retake your resting heart rate because the best time to take your resting pulse is when you are completely relaxed, sitting still for at least 20 minutes, and you will want to make sure that you have not consumed caffeine or any other stimulant prior to taking your heart rate. You should measure this at least 2 different times and then average them. As you increase your cardiorespiratory fitness level, your resting heart rate should decrease over time. Let's calculate your heart rate reserve. First, you will need to estimate your maximal heart rate, which is the fastest rate at which your heart will beat in 1 minute. Please note, this is definitely not where you want to be exercising. Let's calculate heart rate reserve for an individual who is 22 with a resting heart rate of 68. First, multiply your age by 0.7. So, 22 multiplied by 0.7 equals 15.4. Now subtract 15.4 from 208. In our example, this individual's maximal heart rate is 193 beats per minute. Next, we will estimate your heart rate reserve. Subtract your resting heart rate from your maximal heart rate. In our example, we will subtract 68 from 193. The result is your heart rate reserve, or 125 for our example. Now let's figure out the range for your heart rate reserve. Your threshold of training or minimum heart rate for achieving health benefits is 40% of heart rate reserve. To calculate your threshold heart rate, multiply your heart rate reserve by 0.40 and then add your resting heart rate. In our example, we will multiply 125 times 0.40. Then add in the resting heart rate of 68. This gives us 118 beats per minute. And finally, we will figure out the upper limit. The upper limit of your target zone is 85% of your heart rate reserve. To calculate your upper limit heart rate, multiply your heart rate reserve by 0.85 and then add your resting heart rate. So, in our example, we will multiply 125 times 0.85, which equals 106. Then add 68, which equals 174 beats per minute. In order to achieve the best results for improving your health-related cardiorespiratory fitness, you should work between the threshold and upper limits of heart rate reserve. This is your target heart rate zone. For best results, begin lower in the target zone and gradually increase your exercise intensity. While exercising, it is easier to time your heart rate for 15 seconds rather than for a full 60 seconds. Divide your threshold and upper limit heart rate reserve by 4 to calculate the 15-second beats per minute value. If you wanted to stay in your moderate intensity zone, you would need to calculate a moderate upper limit by multiplying your heart rate reserve by 0.59 for 59%. We already estimated our maximal heart rate by using the more accurate method of multiplying your age by 0.7 and then subtracting that value from 208. You can also use the simple method of subtracting your age from 220. With maximal heart rate, you would determine your target heart rate zone by simply multiplying maximal heart rate by 0.55 to determine your threshold and by 0.90 to determine your upper limit. Borg's rating of perceived exertion is another method of determining intensity. Here, the individual will identify their exercise intensity based on how hard they think they are working. Showing here is the original scale where an individual would want to be working between 12 and 16 for health-related cardiorespiratory endurance. There is a revised scale that ranges from 0 to 10 and is suggested that individuals are more likely to be able to accurately estimate a value on a scale of 0 to 10. Either version is a good way to estimate intensity, especially for sedentary individuals who are out of shape. The talk test is the easiest but least scientific method of measuring cardiorespiratory exercise intensity. While exercising, if you can carry on an intense conversation or recite poetry, then your intensity is too easy. And if you are gasping for breath to talk, you are working too hard and need to slow down. If you are able to talk in complete sentences, then you are working at moderate intensity. This table identifies each method of estimating cardiorespiratory intensity. Here is your exercise prescription for cardiorespiratory endurance for health-related fitness. The American College of Sports Medicine recommends 3 to 5 days per week of moderate to vigorous rhythmic continuous activity at 40 to 59% of heart rate reserve to be performed for 20 to 60 minutes at a time, depending on level of intensity. Ultimately, we should be getting at least 150 minutes per week for moderate intensity and 75 minutes for vigorous intensity. For health-related fitness, you can reduce your time when exercising at vigorous intensity. Identifying your intensity when performing cardiorespiratory endurance activities will help you to put into place the remaining pieces of the FIT principle. We identified 4 methods of monitoring your intensity level. From most to least scientific, they are heart rate reserve, maximal heart rate, rating of perceived exertion, and the talk test. You should choose the method that works best for you. If you are just beginning, you may want to calculate your heart rate reserve zone. Once you feel comfortable with evaluating your intensity, you can then move to the more simple methods, such as rating of perceived exertion or the talk test. You can also use a heart rate monitor if you have the technology available in your wearable tracker. If you are working at moderate intensity, you should accumulate 150 minutes each week, which equates to a frequency of 3 to 5 times per week for at least 30 minutes each time. And if you are working at vigorous intensity, you should accumulate 75 minutes each week, which equates to a frequency of 3 to 5 times per week for at least 20 minutes each time. And, of course, the type of activity should be any rhythmic, continuous activity that increases your heart rate to moderate or vigorous intensity. And remember, it should be enjoyable. When you first begin, you should start out at low to moderate intensity and gradually increase your frequency, time, intensity, and type.